Man, letter S. The letter S is strong, let me tell you.
I have to put all of these books back on my shelf. Ah.
Hey, my name is Yasmina and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm gonna give you guys so many book recommendations because I want to do the A to Z book recommendations. So giving you at least one, most of the time more, recommendations for each letter of the English alphabet. A couple of rules though. First of all, books cannot be sequels. So the books I'm gonna recommend to you guys are either the first book in a series or standalone novels, because I don't want to recommend to you like the third, fourth book in a series. And the second rule is that we ignore the word the. So if the title begins with the, for example, The Catcher in the Rye, that would work for C because the next word is catcher, okay? Good. So I'll also try to keep these recommendations quite brief since we do have a lot of books to go through. So without further ado, let's get into a bunch of book recommendations from me to you. These will span a lot of genres, but let's be real, it'll mostly be fantasy. But there's some other genres in there as well. So let's begin with, of course, A. I have two books here for A. The first one is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the epic Realm of the Elderlings fantasy series, and this is the first book also in the Farseer trilogy. But in the first book, Fitz is a young boy and he is the bastard son of Prince Chivalry, and that comes with its own set of trouble. That's all I'll say. My second recommendations for the letter A is And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. This is of course a crime mystery novel, quite famous one. It was honestly my favorite Agatha Christie that I've read. It was just so incredibly atmospheric and very, very creepy, and the murders that happened were very clever, I should say. Really enjoyed it, really quick read. I also have two books for the letter B. The first one is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This is a historical fiction novel and we follow Death. This is set during World War II, and aside from Death, we also follow Liesel, I think that's how you say it, who is a 9-year-old girl who really, really loves books. Honestly, one of the best books I think I've ever read. The other B recommendation is Blood Song by Anthony Ryan. This is the start of an epic fantasy trilogy and I absolutely adored this book. It's quite a it's a thick boy, but I loved it. I like to compare this to Game of Thrones in the sense that if Game of Thrones was solely following Jon Snow on the wall. Yeah. For C, I only found one book that I could recommend because all the rest were part of series, and that is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. This is a YA sci-fi futuristic book about an android in Hong Kong. Really fast read, really fun. I read this a long time ago, but I really enjoyed it, so I would recommend it. Another two books for the letter D. The first one, Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a book I read recently and absolutely loved. This is about a fictional band in the late 70s to early 80s, and we basically follow this band from the moment they became a band and how they disbanded and all of the drama that happened with them. And oh boy, let me tell you, there is a lot of drama. Super addicting, really, really good read. The next D is The Devouring Grey by Kristin Lynn Herman. This is essentially a YA Stranger Things is what I would compare it to. I loved it. I read this during October and I would highly recommend it. It's quite a creepy read in the same way that Stranger Things is a creepy show. Really, really good. E. I also have two books. I mainly have two books for most of these. The first one is The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. This is a fantasy novella. It is very short, and in my opinion, this is honestly one of his best works just in general. It's very short since it's a novella. I would highly, highly recommend it. Just read it. It won the Hugo Award. It's just brilliant. And the other ebook is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. This, of course, is a sort of middle grade YA sci-fi adventure, and we follow our main character who is whisked off to a battle school in space where he learns to become a spaceship pilot. And we follow our main character as he is tested through a series of military games. So these kids in this academy are trained to go into the space military. And Ender is one of these cadets. For F, I could only find one, but it's a very, very good one, and that is The Final Empire, also by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Mistborn series. It's the first book in the Mistborn First Era trilogy, but Mistborn continues on with Second Era, at least for now. This is such an incredible world, one of the most unique worlds I've ever read. This basically takes place after the evil has won in the fight against good and evil, and the world is in torment. And ash falls from the sky, and there's a bunch of other things. Read it. For the letter G, I have also two books. One, which is a bit more obvious, and that is, of course, A Game of Thrones. I just realized this doesn't count because the title starts with A. Moving on, I have one book for the letter G, that is Give the Dark My Love by Beth Revis. This is a super, super dark YA fantasy series. It takes place at a magical school, a magical university, and it was very good, very dark, necromancy. For H, I have a very obvious one and a not so obvious one. The obvious one, any of the Harry Potter books. I just picked up Prisoner of Azkaban because, I don't know, you know the drill. The other recommendation is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. This is a humorous sci-fi story. I love this book. It's so, so funny. Definitely British humor, but it's so good. It's also really short, so you should definitely check this out if you haven't already. The movie adaptation is also very good. For the letter I actually have two of my favorite books of all time, essentially. The first one is I Was Born for This by Alice Osman. This is a YA contemporary novel, and I adored this book so much. Oh my god. This book follows two perspectives. One is the frontman of the most famous band in this world called The Ark, and the second perspective is following one of their biggest fans and how their two roads come together. If you're a big fan of anything, I highly recommend this book. And then the next one is essentially my favorite YA contemporary novel, or just one of my favorite books of all time. That is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. This follows the story of two twins, a boy and a girl, who were very, very close when they were children, but now that they're getting into their teen years, they have split paths a little bit, and we just follow their alternate POVs. It's one of the most beautifully written books I've ever read, and I aspire to one day write like this. For J, I honestly struggled. The only one I could think of was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and again, I think you are all very aware of Jane Eyre. I actually really enjoyed this book, but of course it's a classic, so I don't really want to say more than that. For K, I also have one of my favorite books that I've read recently this year, and that is Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. I have a spoiler-free dual review of this book and another book, which I'll link that video up here and down in the description. This is so much fun. This is epic fantasy that doesn't take itself too seriously. This follows a quest of this group of mercenaries who are getting the band back together and are going on another quest. And it was fantastic. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is a sci-fi novel that is all about the characters aboard this spaceship that is flying to a different planet, and all of the crazy characters and all of the weird relationships that spark between them, and it was fantastic. A great start to sci-fi if you ever needed something like that. For the letter M, I have, of course, The Magicians by Lev Grossman. This is one of my favorite fantasy series, and this is the first book in that series. This follows Quentin, who is a huge fan of something of the sort of Chronicles of Narnia / Harry Potter, and he's going to university, except this university suddenly is a university of magic, and he is suddenly a magician. For the letter N, I also have two of my favorite books of all time. I can't. The first one is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. Yes, this is an enchanting, magical novel about a mysterious circus that shows up in the middle of nowhere unannounced and then just as swiftly disappears. But with it comes a lot of magic and drama and interesting characters. Such a well-written, enchanting book. And then, of course, literally, probably my favorite book of all time, The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This is the start of the epic fantasy series This is the start of the epic fantasy series, The Kingkiller Chronicles, which we still only have 2 books of, but yeah, this is essentially my favorite book of all time. Again, Magic University, incredible characters, great world building. What more can you want? I have a book that I don't think I've ever really talked about, but that I really enjoy, and that is One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus, and this is a YA thriller that I actually really enjoyed. This follows a group of teenagers in high school, and one of them dies at the beginning of the book, and it's up to the rest to figure out what happened. Really good. For P, here we go. 2 YA contemporaries, quite classic ones, I would say. The first one is, again, one of my favorite books of all time. This is Paper Towns by John Green. This is a book that inspired my books, and just, I love it. This is a road trip book following a wallflower who falls in love with a bit of a strange girl, and this girl disappears in the middle of the night, and then our main character is trying to find her. And then, speaking of wallflowers, of course I have The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, one of the most sort of classic YA contemporaries. As the title suggests, it follows a bit of a wallflower who also is just trying to navigate high school and life. Aren't we all? For Q, I could only really find one book, and that is Queens of Geek by Jen Wilde. This is a YA contemporary novel. This is about 3 best friends from Australia who go to essentially a Comic-Con in the US, and one of them has severe anxiety, and it's all about friendship and fandom, and it was awesome. Next up for R, I have Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This is a sci-fi novel that I absolutely love. I'm sure you've heard of it. This follows a lot of sort of 80s pop culture references in a massive online virtual reality scavenger hunt. Also, Radio Silence by Alice Osman, another Alice Osman book. I really love this author. This is about 2 friends in their final year of high school, and sort of them trying to figure out what they want to do with the rest of their lives, but it's a lot more than that. I just cannot go into it in this video, but really, really good. Really recommend this. And then comes the letter S, which, let me tell you, I had no idea so many fantastic books start with the letter S. This is essentially, I could not pick, so I have 4 books. I just could not pick from these. These are one of my favorite books of all time, so let's just go through them. Man, letter S. The letter S is strong, let me tell you. The first one is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is a dark academia novel set during college, and a mysterious group of philosophy students and their mysterious teacher, and the main character who is very, very intrigued about this weird group that he's not a part of. Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa. Literally one of my favorite books ever. This is the start of a YA fantasy series inspired by Japanese mythology about a kitsune and an assassin who are trying to save the world. Essentially, it reads like an anime. Amazing. The Serpent King by Jeff Zentner. This is a YA contemporary novel that made me so mad and made me cry and made me literally feel all of the feels, like all of them, all at once. It was fantastic. And of course, one of my new favorite reads, Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. How many Sandersons have I had in this video so far? Probably too many, but I can't help it. This is amazing. This is YA sci-fi. Spencer is one of the best characters I've ever read. This book is a masterclass on what YA sci-fi should be like. For T, I have Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. This is the first volume in the Raya Revelations series. Each book is like 2 books in one, so it's a trilogy, but it's not really a trilogy. It's actually 6 books. Anyway, this is super, super fun adult epic fantasy novel. We follow the infamous duo Oroys and Hadrian, who are one of my favorite 2 characters of all time. Their banter is fantastic, and they just basically go on these epic quests that other people send them on. Super fun fantasy, really recommend. And then I have Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This is a YA thriller mystery novel. Main character has severe anxiety, but she loves mysteries, and she goes to a new boarding school, and that boarding school has a very dark secret, and Stevie, the main character, is trying to uncover the secrets of this school. For the letter U, I have Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This is Ukrainian-inspired fantasy. It's more like a fairy tale fantasy, I would say, and it's about our main character who is supposed to go up the dragon's tower and change his ways. Yes. I could not find anything for the letter V. For W, however, I have another Sanderson, The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Stormlight Archive epic fantasy series. This is also a chunker, and this is incredible. This is one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. I don't think I need to say too much of this. If you haven't started this series yet, please do. And this is the first book. It's so good. Highly recommend it. I don't even think there are any books that start with X. At least I couldn't think of any that I've read. So, and for Y, again, I only could find one book. This is Yes Man by Danny Wallace. And this is a strange kind of sci-fi book, but I've read this such a long time ago, but it has a special place in my heart. But essentially, this is about a guy who starts living his life by saying yes to literally everything. And you might have also seen the movie with Jim Carrey and Zooey Deschanel. I also thought that one was really fun. But yeah, it's essentially the same concept. And I can't really remember much about it, but it's literally the only book I have that started with Y. And I have nothing that starts with Z. So, actually, we have gone through the entire alphabet, and those were the book recommendations that I could come up with for each letter of the alphabet. Surprisingly, we only missed 1, 2, 3 letters, so we didn't have V, X, or Z. And please, if anyone has a book that they would recommend that starts with either V, X, or Z, please leave that in the comment section below, because I would be very interested, and maybe I can pick it up and then complete my little alphabet reading challenge. Woof, honestly, I'm a bit out of breath. I hope that I gave you some good recommendations. I hope that you could find some good recommendations in this video. Of course, I had to be quite quick for each book, because otherwise this video would have been probably 2 hours long, and I don't think anyone wants to sit through that. But I think in general it's a good overall look into the kinds of books that I like to read and what I can recommend to you guys. I'll try to link all the books that I mentioned down in the description. That's going to take an eternity. So please give this video a big thumbs up, because this was a bit of a hassle for me to make. That was it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time in a new video. Bye!